Welcome, divas and dudes, this morning to Powerhouse Bakery. We are still in our series about the gut biome, and I'm really excited because, there's so much that we're learning about really what the biome does for us, and it's absolutely beautiful to realize that the human body has what we call two brains, and we're learning about all the amazing functions that the biome really can do for us. Last time what we talked about was really what makes up the biome. We talked a little bit about what we are born with and how being born has a way to really augment the biome that we are given, both with genetics and of course with the environment. And so the environment hits us right when we pass through the birth canal and enter the world, and if we miss out on that, that might actually affect our overall variety and wealth of that biome that we now live with. We also learned last time that as we go through life, that biome needs to be nourished. It's a symbiotic relationship, meaning that as we take care of our biome, it will take care of us. And so really what we're on a quest for is, how do we feed it? What kinds of foods help with nourishing that biome? And it's interesting because we're still just learning about it. Sometimes there's things that our bodies do that our brain knows about, but we in our cognition, we don't really have any knowledge of what's going on in our body. And so I think it's really fun to learn that and to really understand it, and it just gives a whole new breadth and depth of appreciation for what we eat. And what I love is that now the medical community is starting to really pay attention more. We're starting to see a very clear connection between what we eat and our mood, so how our brain functions, not to mention how our GI tract functions, not to mention how our immune system functions. So I love that we're learning about the biome in a way that really gives us some action items, like what can we do to help our body help itself. And when we are in the middle of a scary time with COVID and just the whole idea that viruses are ever changing, they're super smart in that they're also going to fight to survive. And so the evolution of the biome based on our environment will also be very similar to the evolution of other bacteria and viruses in our environment. So it's kind of like, well, we're equally matched. Our body is kind of the environment inside us, and the environment outside also has a way of perpetuating its efficacy. And so, it's kind of reassuring, I think, to know that the world makes sense. There's going to be life and propagation of life in a way that really keeps us all going. And it's hard to imagine that viruses have any value in our world, but we have to believe that in the creation of all things, there's some importance that maybe we don't know of right now. So as we go through our life and we realize that sometimes medicines are super important, so we take antibiotics because we have an infection. So we're treating a situation, and thank goodness, right? I mean, antibiotics have done so much for us as a culture, as a race. What we're going to talk about today is kind of the next stage of that, and that is, now that we understand diet has a really profound impact on our bodies, we're learning that certain ways that we eat could in fact improve on other disease systems. So, we've heard a little bit about the keto diet as far as how it originated, and the whole process was that when we learn about how the brain functions with different foods, we start to realize that some people will have a greater effect from their environment and their food, and others won't. So with the process of deduction and the scientific method, we figured out, wow, if somebody eats very low carbohydrate, it has a better impact on their brain if they have epilepsy. So the keto diet was really developed to treat epilepsy. And so what I really want to go on, I'm going to look at my notes so I make sure I put it in order. Some of the diseases that have used diet to treat those symptoms are really interesting to me. So epilepsy is one. What's another one? A little more maybe mainstream. Irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. Something that's a little bit newer is degenerative diseases. So neurodegenerative. And of course, we're here at Powerhouse Bakery. We are 100% gluten-free, which really was identified because some people had some real problems with their GI tract. So celiac disease is going to be an issue. Thank you, Mary. When we take out certain types of grains, we realize that it helps them. And so now we've learned that celiac disease, some neurodegenerative diseases, irritable bowel syndrome, and epilepsy all seem to be treated with some great efficacy by diet. And so the keto diet is low in carbohydrate, and that seemed to help the brain function better. So the commonality here is that they are low in carbohydrates or even no carbohydrates, or certain carbohydrates are taken out. And so specific, taken out. That's my little arrow, taken out. And so I think it's so cool that we're starting to understand that when we modify a diet, we see some improved symptoms. And that's been studied fairly recent and really fairly well. The epilepsy situation was really looked at in the 70s, finding that people would really improve. Irritable bowel is, again, somewhat newer. And I think what's interesting, too, is that this one is so individual, because when we take out certain sugars, the symptoms subside. So irritable bowel is a big umbrella term, and it's referring to what? Gas, bloating, just stomach pain, so GI pain. Whereas epilepsy is a little more frank. I mean, we're able to measure an autonomic response, which is for some reason the brain clicks over and has a response. So it might be absence seizures, which we don't see, or it might be a grand mal, which is very significant. This one's a little more internal. It's a little bit harder to measure. Yet people will go to the doctor in lots of pain and discomfort and have a problem with what they're doing. They need help. So one treatment phase is to give them medicine. Medicine has side effects. And so what's really cool is that now we see, there's something that the patient can do on their own that will minimize the symptoms. And so we love that. This is a whole new area of study. I can't say that word very well, neurodegenerative disease. Some exciting stuff on the horizon with Alzheimer's, but we know for sure with Parkinson's, even with the spectrum disorders. And so we're learning, and again, it's a little harder to measure, kind of like this one. We're learning that there is definitely an impact. And then celiac disease. Anybody know someone with celiac? Yeah. I've met so many here at Powers Bakery. And some people will say, well, I've never been tested, but when I take out certain carbohydrates, I feel so much better. And to me, that's just a great example that it's very personable, very personal, and we really understand that there's a lot more to it. It's not a black or white situation. And really, same thing with the keto diet. What we're going to talk a little bit about today is the different types of the keto diet, and ultimately that means taking out or very much reducing carbohydrates. And you've heard me talk a lot about how important carbohydrates are. And so for sure, we need to understand the duration of taking out or changing a diet. We want to improve a disease, but we also want to make sure we don't start to deteriorate the gut biome, because we talked about last week that the gut biome absolutely depends on what? Carbohydrates, fiber. We talked about the guy with the cart full of ground beef and celery, and we thought, how long can he feel better? And so what we're going to find in this research is there is a level of diminishing returns. So a person follows a keto diet to treat their epilepsy, and how long can they do that diet without having now side effects because they're eating so differently. They're cutting out a lot of foods that they actually really need. And so that's the kind of thing I want us to really understand and see what value and benefit are we going to be able to see with diet and the whole idea around a macronutrient. So let's talk a little bit about what I mean by keto diet. So let's kind of break them down so we have a better understanding of exactly what is a keto diet, and then we're going to break down with a little more detail the other diets that are looking at modified carbohydrate. So help me here. What's a keto? What's it high in? Yes. So high in fat, moderate to low in protein, and very low to almost no carbohydrate. So there's a couple little images that I looked at, and I think it really helps. If we think of something like 90%, and it's somewhere between 75 and 90% fat. That's a lot, right? And then there's this little percentage of carbohydrate. It might be 1 to 5%. And then protein. Right in here, the balance. So, you kind of put your math together and decide where you are in that range. But again, not very much protein. So that substantiates the whole veganism idea, right? That we can survive pretty well on a low protein. Now, where the fat comes from sometimes overlaps, and we end up getting a lot more protein. Can you think of a diet that started in the 70s that said you can eat all the eggs and bacon that you want? Yes. The Atkins, was kind of the original keto, where we really learned that people were seeing an improvement on high fat. So now what I want to do is show you what a diet would look like in this 75 range. So let's just, because sometimes looking at percentages and grams is very hard to conceptualize. I mean, even for us dietitians and nutritionists, this is something that is complicated because, we're going to look at the total calories, and then we're going to break the calories down to percentage. Because if you're eating a 2,000 calorie diet or a 1,000 calorie diet, there's a big difference of the gram levels that you'll ultimately be eating. So I'm going to do it with concepts. So a keto diet with this range, a breakfast would be something like a half of an avocado, 1 slice of Ezekiel toast, 1 egg, and we're going to cook the egg in 1 teaspoon of EVOO, and our slice of toast is going to have a tablespoon of almond butter. And we might even have the half of avocado with a half of a tomato. So we've got our healthy fats, we've got our fat and our protein, we've got a little bit more healthy fat, we've got some complex carbs, and we've got some veggies. So that looks like a pretty realistic breakfast, you think? And so really looking at this ratio helps us to conceptualize what 75 to 90% fat looks like. Do you think that's doable? Pretty much. And what I'm trying to create is an overlap to the Mediterranean diet. Because the real picture I want to show you is that even if we're trying to treat one of those diseases, we can live in a spot where we're also helping to keep our gut happy. And so yes, there'll be a little bit of a ratio variation because there's some exciting research that says the keto diet helps to prevent cancer, maybe even treat. So prevent and treat are those words that are very nebulous. Prevent versus treat. Right? And so if somebody has cancer and they want to minimize the growth of any cancer cells. That's treating it. If you want to prevent it, of course, you've never had it, and you want to keep your immune system really strong. So really your plans are kind of different if you're preventing it versus treating it. So always keep that in mind, like what's our goal with the diet? But anyway, so the idea is that it's a pretty workable breakfast. And so I'm going to put did everybody have the breakfast? Okay, now I'm going to do the lunch. And I was thinking about this last night when I was having my dinner. Throw out an amount of how much salad you typically will make if you're having a salad with or as your meal. 2 cups, 1 cup, 2, 3. I like that. So I measured mine. I actually had 4 cups of greens. And so you imagine a nice big wide bowl. Let's see if I have one. Nice big wide bowl, pretty full. So, it depends on how you measure a cup, right? You could say, well, that's about how much I do, but I mashed my greens down. So a very generous salad would be about 4 cups of greens. And then we might add in some radish, maybe some mushrooms. What else? Maybe some cherry tomatoes. So cucumber, there we go. Okay, so you get it. So a few other things, but for sure the greens. Now, just for space, I'm going to move these over because we're going to talk about the Low Fodmap diet. So I wanted you to keep those veggies in mind because as we're looking at those other diseases that don't take all carbohydrates out, like the keto diet, they take out very specific ones. We're going to learn about the Low Fodmap, and that's really it's like a subset of the Mediterranean diet, right? Because it's still encouraging adequate carbohydrates. Okay, so anyway, this is our keto lunch. 4 cups of greens plus some other veggies. And then we might do a tablespoon of what kind of nuts? Maybe walnuts. And we might do another tablespoon of hemp seeds. And maybe even a tablespoon of blue cheese. There's our good probiotic right there. Blue cheese, fermented cheese. We love that, right? And then maybe we're even going to do a squeeze of lemon and maybe a teaspoon or so of walnut oil. What am I missing? So a bunch of greens, a little bit of veggies, and some flavors on there. Did I add any processed oil? Not really. That's just one ingredient, oil. Yes, it is an oil. We've learned about no oil cooking. Could I use one of those sauces I made? Absolutely. Mediterranean theme is right in this idea. And we've got plenty of seeds and nuts. And this is a salad that perfectly fits into 90% of the calories coming from fats. And I bet you this would be something you'd love. And you might even feel satisfied. I mean, sometimes you feel like, gosh, eating a salad for dinner, that's not going to be enough. Okay, so let's put in a little bit of meat. Maybe we do 2 ounces of tuna. Because remember, our protein is small. And yeah, we are getting a bonus of protein from our nuts and seeds. But the good thing is we've got all of these healthy fats. Our carbohydrates are about at 1% of this salad's calories. And we're still getting ourselves some protein in there. Here at Powerhouse Bakery, we do the Suzette chicken salad, and we mix the chicken up, and we also do a Maui tuna. So both of those we mix with some olive oil mayonnaise, and we add it to a bunch of veggies, and then you have the nuts and seeds on top. So we really put this idea to practice, and it's quite satisfying. So I love the idea that meals could easily be almost vegan, but if not Mediterranean, and still be keto. Okay? All right, so that would be, let's do one more meal. So this could be our lunch or our dinner. It was my dinner last night, and so that's why I kind of had this light bulb moment, realizing that, if we think about it, we oftentimes do eat a keto meal. Salads are the very example. Now, if I had made it the quinoa kale salad here at Powerhouse Bakery, would that have been keto? Well, no, because it has all the quinoa in it. But as we're going to look at in a minute, when we look at carbohydrate choices, quinoa is a really awesome one because it's really a seed. And yes, it does provide carbohydrates, but because it provides so much fiber, which is what we want for our healthy gut, quinoa becomes a great choice if we wanted to add a little more satiety to that salad or more calories. Okay, so let's do one more meal. What if we were going to do salmon? So we know that salmon is a high-fat fish. If we were to measure the amount of fat in the salmon, and it was posted right there on the label, I bet a lot of us would cringe because there's a lot of fat in salmon. Probably in the neighborhood of, in a 4-ounce serving, probably about as much as 12 grams of fat. Maybe even more. And then, I don't know if any of you eat the skin, that would make the fat content go up even more. If you ate the brown section right under the skin, that's the higher fat section too. So, it could go easily up to 18 grams in a 4-ounce serving. So we're easily on our way, right? Because this doesn't provide us with any carbohydrates. So now it's all about what are we going to eat with this meal. So what should we put with our salmon?
Asparagus.
Yeah, okay. So let's do asparagus and potatoes. And what I love is this combination. So, our culture kind of teaches us, especially us women, okay, think of your protein, your carbohydrate, and your veggie. Well, when we do a combination, it's really nice because it lowers the amount of each. So the potatoes, you could easily get 1 to 2 red potatoes cut up, and then you might have, 4 to 6 stalks. Do you think that's going to keep us at our fairly low carbohydrate amount? Yeah. This together, if I said 1 to 2 of the small red potatoes and 4 to 6 asparagus, probably about 5 to maybe 8 grams of carbs. Nice and low. Nice and low. And then we always say you have to eat something leafy green. So let's add our side salad. So in this one, of course, it's not going to be that big 4-cupper, but we do side salad of spinach, and maybe some other greens, maybe some fresh basil, and then add a little olive oil, and again, more nuts and seeds. So this is a very realistic dinner. Doesn't feel like you're giving up anything, doesn't feel like you're eating low carb necessarily, because you're getting some in there. And so easily it fits into our 75 to 90% of the meal coming from fats, and we can make them really healthy fats. And it adds up quickly when you start cooking with a little olive oil, adding some nuts and seeds for sure, but we could even add a slice or 2 of avocado again, and that's going to give us a higher ratio of the fats. So one great mindset is adding in fats. And whenever I have you build your best foods list, I always really emphasize that fats category, because otherwise the foods pick it for us. You know what I mean? So if we were to buy foods that were pre-seasoned or pre-packaged, and we look at the label and it has fats, did we get to add that fat in there? No. So that kind of fat is definitely not as healthy for us, not for our gut, not for our cardiovascular system, and not for our immune system, as it is when we get to choose what fats go into the meal. So that's kind of my take on a keto diet. Easy to do, easy to fold into some of the principles that we've learned in the Mediterranean diet. In fact, this is psyllium. So oftentimes people on a keto diet get constipated. Now we're going to talk down and dirty, right? People suffer from constipation when they follow the keto diet. Well, we know that when you take out fiber from your diet, what happens to your peristalsis? Slows down. We know that. And so doctors and, nutritionists will say, well, you need to take a fiber supplement if you're going to follow a keto diet. And to me, that would be an absolutely no, you do not. If you follow a keto diet that has added healthy fats along with fibers, you don't have to. Now, psyllium can be put into a food, and I promise you it's a lot tastier to have it as a keto bun than if it was this powder mixed up with water or orange juice, which is hilarious because now we're adding a whole bunch of sugar into the fiber in order to drink the fiber that you didn't get when you ate the foods, right? I know. So it was like, oh, backtreading for sure. But, this is actually sold in the pharmaceutical section of HEB, so the, pharmacy. It sometimes is in the Whole Foods or healthy living section, but it just kind of makes me chuckle that it's thought of as a medicinal additive rather than being able to have it as an ingredient if you really do need to add in extra fiber to go ahead and do that in a cooked item. So in these buns, they're soft and wonderfully pliable. We use this in our Suzette sandwich and our breakfast sandwich. It's soft, it's workable, it's giving you some almond flour, which also is going to be good for fiber. It's not going to raise the carbohydrate level, even though it has a nice bread feel, so we can use it in that capacity. So it's really, I think, valuable to think about what the diet's going to look like before we put a label on it. So if I'm going to eat keto, that unfortunately gives it a plan that encourages all kinds of packaged things, including your packaged fiber. Okay, so now what I want to do is paint the picture of the Mediterranean. So again, we're doing a combination. Mediterranean. We're doing a comparison and a combination of these two diets. So now if we look at the Mediterranean and we see in general, when we're born and we eat and fuel our healthy gut, we have really good evidence across cultures to see that people seem to do better when they eat plants. And that's contradictory to the whole keto principle that it will help cure disease, will help fix all these things. Are we fixing or are we preventing? So that's one issue. The other issue is, how about we think back on how we started our healthy gut biome? And we always want to try to start with a healthy biome. So if we're in our 50s and 60s, no, we can't turn back the clock, but we can sure share this information with our kids that eating healthy Mediterranean might be better than just letting your kids eat whatever they want. It's 4th of July, let them eat, charred hot dogs off the grill. Let them have Coke, let them have chips, right? And let them worry about it later. And that's exactly what I want to try to avoid. Of course, prevention is a great approach, but even when we're looking at the Mediterranean diet, we can still see some great benefits to the whole process of how carbohydrates affect both negatively and positively our body. So when we think of the Mediterranean, we've got a couple of variations. We have a gluten-free diet. We have a low Fodmap. And we have a modified keto, and I'll just put this one as low glycemic. So these are ways of using carbohydrates more specifically, rather than in the keto diet, which it pretty much says cut them all out. But I want you to understand kind of the rationale between these different ones. And remember, we're always thinking back on what diseases are they treating. Well, we know that we've got celiac disease, we've got epilepsy, we've got irritable bowel. Now we also have cancer. So again, the medical community perks up when they hear that there is something we can do that helps treat these diseases. If we could turn back time and all eat, with great wisdom and knowledge that this is the way we should be eating, of course, we wouldn't have the medical community. We wouldn't even need them because we'd all be healthy. We're not there yet. So we want to understand how these different ways of eating are supposed to impact our disease potential, both treating it and preventing it. So gluten-free is pretty simple. Which grains have gluten? Gluten-free. What was that?
Wheat.
Yes. So this is going to be taking out wheat and all of its cousins. So barley, rye. Yeah, it's mainly wheat. We see wheat in so many different capacities. The low FODMAP is a little bit more nebulous. Low FODMAP is looking at carbohydrates that don't digest very well. So if we think of fruits, that is a great example of carbohydrates that don't digest very well. We also think of dairy. And this one might surprise you, but sugar alcohols. What do I mean by that, sugar alcohols? It's become more and more popular with the keto diet because sugar alcohols are not digested fully, which theoretically means we don't get all of the calories from them. And they're the ones that end in OL. So sugar alcohols will be something like maltitol, xylitol, erythritol, so anything ending in OL. Now, some of these do naturally occur in nature, but not much. Fruits, of course, occur in nature. And the Mediterranean diet says we should really eat a lot of fruits. Remember when we think of the Mediterranean, the sugars are way up here, so we say don't eat very many sugars. This is again Mediterranean. We're saying olive oil is here. So not just the oils, but nuts and seeds. Right? And up here is fish. And way up here is beef. Some little spot over here is dairy. So just to kind of get reacquainted with what the Mediterranean pyramid looks like, what is down here? Yes, fruits, veg, and grains. Yeah, so if we think of the Mediterranean, which again is sort of the standard healthy eating that still the medical community will embrace. They'll say, follow the Mediterranean diet, you'll be fine. Honestly, they probably don't really know what that means unless they've studied nutrition a lot, but that's okay. So they'll say, follow this. Now, what I'm saying is, okay, if there is some diseases that get worse or maybe can be treated by taking out some carbohydrates, how does that work with the Mediterranean diet? So here's my thought, is that if we are raised on eating a lot of fruit, our gut biome has developed the microbiota to do very well digesting fruits. So people that have grown up on the Mediterranean eating style and have eaten peaches and apples throughout their childhood, they probably have a biome that handles it just fine. However, if they haven't used a lot of fruit and they start increasing their fruit because at age 35 or 45, their doctor says, you need to start eating Mediterranean. They think, okay, cool, I'm going to start eating a lot more fruit. Then they get IBS. They get IBS because their body's not used to managing all these fruits. And so then they go back to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, you must have IBS, so we're going to put you on a low FODMAP diet. You follow me? And they do. They try to do all that they're told, and their symptoms do get better, at least for a while. And now they've been convinced that, gosh, well, if fruits are bad for me, maybe I better take out more. More is better, right? I'm enlightened now. I feel better because I had some symptoms from eating these fruits. So now maybe I better just take out all that. I'm just going to follow keto. What do you think's happening to their gut biome? And so the research is telling us that as we start taking out carbohydrates, the variety of healthy bugs decreases. Also, the volume of total bugs decreases. And so we know in general that when we're born with a greater variety, and remember last week we studied cultures that live close to the land, and remember Dr. Poop, we described him, and basically he went out and lived with these people, and as soon as he gained their confidence, he was able to study their bacteria, and he was astonished at the wide variety of bacteria that's helping these people stay healthy, live long, not get obese, have a strong immune systems, all these things. And so I think it's very interesting that we get into this loop and then we feel like maybe we take out more is going to be better, and that's just not necessarily true. Let's look at cancer. If we get a cancer diagnosis, and there's some research that says that sugars cause the cancers to grow faster, and also simple refined carbohydrates. If we don't really think through that, instead of taking out this little spot, we're going to try taking out a lot of this, because we were thinking that this is sugars, because this whole area is carbohydrates. So how much of that do we take out trying to get rid of this way at the top of this healthy eating plan? And so even Elaine's recipe I thought was a fabulous one. She's looking at how to increase seeds. So instead of eggs, flax seeds are in there. Instead of refined sugar, she's using maple, orange juice, and coconut sugar. So that's not what this is talking about. It's really talking about a whole different category of sugars. Is it the maltitol or the xylitol? No. They're sugars that have a calorie value that match the flavors. And so that's when we start looking at even another category, which is the connection of our central nervous system. So this whole idea that our biome has a direct connection to our central nervous system, I think is really the big overreaching umbrella. And that is that when we eat foods that are minimally processed, that give us carbohydrates that match the calorie load, it really starts to set the stage for a healthy gut biome. Lots still to learn, but I just love the fact that we're understanding this more and more. So fruits. Now let's look at dairy. So even in the Mediterranean eating style, dairy is used very little. Dairy has lactose, which is another one of those sugars that can be difficult to digest. Can you think of a people group that have, in general, a difficult time with digesting lactose? Sometimes, right? Just age, but also African Americans and Asians. Their culture did not bring dairy in as a constant for their diet. As young children, as babies, they did not get raised on dairy. So could that be a genetic sensitivity that as older people, of course, they're going to have problems in their gut? Maybe so. Some people will say, well, humans were never meant to eat dairy. I know, and I find that hard to believe, because having cattle, part of the human history, has been a huge plus for our strength and really being able to survive, having that option for strong proteins and carbohydrates. But the reality is lactose has an important place in the whole food conundrum, and it has everything to do with the enzyme systems, lactase. So if our body does not have enough of the enzyme, then we can't digest the sugar to get energy from it. Have you seen the solution for this on the shelves at H-E-B? Take a Lactaid pill, right? Yeah. And so it's really just helping your body along. You're taking an enzyme so that you can still have the sugars digested fully. So the Low Fodmap diet says basically the same idea. If we want to decrease the problems of IBS, if we want to decrease the amounts of sugars in our body, we need to take out sugars that aren't digested well. because that will cause the gut upset. I've worked with many folks before that have this big term of IBS, Irritable Bowel Syndrome, or they even have a new diagnosis of cancer and try to take out so much that then they're affecting, in a negative way, their ultimate gut biome. So let's kind of go through a summary, because what I'm trying to show you here is two things. One, we want to keep our gut healthy. And how do we do that? So we're always in search for how do we get our gut healthy? How do we make it healthier? Our best foods list, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, needs to constantly be evolving so we can understand how are we going to change our foods so that it's very personal and it's making sure that it's addressing some of our genetic risk as well as our unknowns, right? And so we know that the keto diet is going to decrease the bioavailability. It's going to decrease the biome numbers of good bacteria. And we know that it also decreases the biome variety. And as we're understanding more and more about the importance of the biome, the numbers and variety, we know that this has a really important implication on our immune system, our brain function. Because remember, we learned a little bit last week that when this biome is out of whack, we see more and more obesity. We see more and more metabolic syndrome. We see some problems with central nervous system changes. Some of the really cool research that is looking at progression of Alzheimer's disease is looking at what's going on in the biome and how does this amazing system help improve cleaning out our brain. Lots to learn still. So one thing that I thought was cool is when people follow the keto diet, the effects are sometimes different. Of course, there's individual differences. Also, time sensitive. Meaning that how long you're following that keto regimen has diminishing returns. So you can, and you probably have heard this before if you follow this, that you go through cycles of keto, and that helps your gut biome kind of normalize. My true philosophy is that that's probably the best approach. Like the examples I just gave you of breakfast, lunch, and dinner that have plant-based foods that are high in fat naturally. We didn't have to supplement with powders or potions or pills, but we had plenty of vegetables, and we even had a little bit of meats. That gives you that naturally occurring keto diet. And it would still go in an evolution, so kind of like how human bodies were evolving. I mean, we had feast or famine. We would have episodes where berries were growing and we could eat more fruits, and then we back off of it. So really time sensitive and duration, overall duration. When what is risky is when we take out a food group permanently. So long term, no, I never eat fruits and grains. That becomes very hard on your body long term. It truly starts to change the biome. So in the research that I read, what happens with the keto gut is that you have a higher production of some of the dangerous bacteria. And that kind of makes sense. We know that with history of even colon cancer, we see that there's a higher incidence of the dangerous bacteria in the gut from the breakdown of meats. And then the transit time is very much slower. So now the lining of the gut is being exposed to those bacteria that aren't very healthy for longer periods of time. You follow? So duration, time sensitive, and of course the individual differences on a keto diet will definitely have an impact on the biome, both the variety of bugs that we have that help us and the numbers. So what do you think the medical industry does to kind of fix this issue? They say, no problem, I will give you some probiotics. Is that a moneymaker for the health world? Yes. And my feeling has always been, be very careful. Some of the other research I thought was so interesting is when we look at the mice studies and even human studies, the symbiosis that has to happen in your gut is twofold. One is, do the bugs get along with each other? And two, do the bugs help the host? And does the host help the bugs? So remember, it's really a two-way street. We can't just throw a bunch in there and expect it to work. It's a very fine line. So we're learning about what bugs are in there and kind of what role do they play. And that's where the genetic mapping I talked with you about last week, that genetic mapping is helping us to understand some of the names of these bacteria and what they do. So probably in 5 years or so, we're going to get to go to the doctor's office and we're going to get a blood test and we're going to get a poop test. And the poop test is going to tell us a lot about what's going on in our second brain. I can't wait for that time. And then we can, instead of doing prevention, we really will have an ability to treat. Because right now, prevention is the safest mode because there's so many factors, and ultimately we can't look in there and see what's happening in our own gut biome. Our brain knows about it, but we in our current cognition, we can't look in there and go, oh, okay, I'm low in Clostridium, bifidum, or whatever one of those funny names are. So it's really important that we try not to go this route. Now, again, some people really have lots of things going on, and this might help, especially with a good doc that's really tracking you closely. Okay, so then the second one is, let's look at the other variations. And so the ultimate answer is which one wins the competition between the keto diet and the Mediterranean diet. It kind of is going to depend on where you are, right? It's going to depend on if you have a disease you're trying to treat. So if you have IBS, it might make sense to really be radical and take out all of the oligosaccharides, like the guy with the big cart of ground beef and celery. But it will be something you don't want to continue. You don't want to keep going for a long period of time. So let's look at the Mediterranean. So again, the Mediterranean is kind of broken down into the pyramid. So this is kind of the overall health. Overall healthy eating. We eat this way to avoid disease, avoid obesity, fuel our immune system. But sometimes it doesn't always work. We come up with a problem. If we have something like, so this is healthy, and so, but we find we have a disease to treat, and it's something like IBS or epilepsy, or celiac disease. If this doesn't work, then we start taking out certain carbohydrates. Again, the FODMAP is kind of this one that's really well known in the industry. The problem is, it's well known for doctors to say, yeah, follow the FODMAP. But that is so big of a swash of color, it doesn't mean a darn thing to the individual. So I have a young guy that says, I have the IBS, I need to follow FODMAP. What does that mean? Feed me FODMAP because I don't understand it. And really, it's a lower amount of certain sugars. So lower amount of fructose, of dairy, and the alcohols, sugar alcohols, the OLs. Okay, so low FODMAP really means take out fructose, dairy, and the oligosaccharides, and the xylitol, the erythritol, the maltitol. And of course, this one is a little different because it means a lot more carbohydrates. So this is really keto. But we can't let that person stay in keto because, again, it's long-term not good. So they have to fold into one of these. So the reality is, if we can eat Mediterranean and eat keto as an overlap, to me, that's a win-win. So if we're going to have fruits, we're going to pick berries. Berries are very low in those oligosaccharides that don't digest well, versus melon, apples, stone fruits like peaches and nectarines. Those tend to have a harder time to digest when it gets into your large intestine. So berries are good. Dairy, if you are a lover of dairy, the best one first would be yogurt. If you're going to eat dairy, eat it as a yogurt. If you don't have problems with dairy, don't take it out. If you do have problems with dairy, start with keeping yogurt and taking out fluid milk. Now, we've got some great options, okay, right? We've got low lactose milk like the Mootopia. We've got the lactate milk. Those are all excellent. Same idea. It'll help to reduce them. And then stay away from diet sweeteners. So all the xylitol, erythritols, and so no diet sugars. So that's pretty much it. I mean, of course, with the FODMAP, they'll go even deeper and they'll say take out grains. Just like with epilepsy, they'll say take out all of the grains. Don't eat quinoa, don't eat rice, don't eat potatoes. Actually, they do let you have potatoes. But it's all a dose dependent. And so if you really had to get very specific with your FODMAP, meaning if you took these things out and just ate a few of these, and if your stomach symptoms go away, oh, good, that's perfect. If you don't, then you take it to a little deeper level and you take out grains. All the while knowing that you want to go through a cycle of letting the gut heal and try to reintroduce them again. Nobody should ever stay on low FODMAP forever. It's again trying to let that symbiotic relationship get reestablished in your gut. Okay? So we don't want to have to give up grains because they're a really valuable part of the soluble fiber and insoluble fiber that helps to feed our gut. And ultimately, we want a healthy gut biome because we know that it has a big impact on our overall well-being. Not to mention our how we feel, so our emotional as well as stress control, and of course avoiding diseases like obesity, because hunger is so important to be turned off by some of these natural carbohydrates. Okay? I hope this helps. So next week what we're going to do is one more look at the biome. This is a 4-week cycle, so we're going to look at it a little bit more. We're going to keep focusing in on the research and what it tells us as far as how is it going to help our immune system, because what we're really most interested in is prevention, but also treatment, and all of that's going to narrow into our immune system. So that's what we'll focus on next week. See you soon.